Cool.
Awesome,
I
bro.
heard that. We almost clicked at like the exact same time. That was really cool.
Sick. Let me start the screen recording. Sick, man.
Cool, dude.
All right, I'm pulling it up. All right, we're good.
Is that it?
Yep, we're good.
We're live. Not live, but
basically, we will be in a few weeks, though.
We're hot. We're recording. Yeah, we will. I think that was a super cool idea that you had to do the whole streaming thing. I never would have thought of that.
Yeah, I definitely want to start live streaming this. Probably in the next few weeks. I'm going to take this bracelet off. It makes too much noise. But I definitely want to start live streaming this, but I got to build the PC first. So I got to work a little bit, save up some money. But I'm sure you can tell people listening that the audio sounds better.
It's so warm.
We got new equipment. We haven't recorded a podcast since like January or some shit. So it's been a while.
Last year.
No, January 2020. We recorded. Remember, you were here over winter break.
Oh, no, January. Yeah. I was thinking June for some reason. Yeah. that's like a while. That's like 11 months.
Almost a year, man. And then the last episode we released was in like May or something. So it's been a while, man. Obviously, COVID put a bunch of stuff on hold, but
everybody thought we were like quitting the podcast.
Bro, when I put up the old podcast equipment up for sale, people were like, "Oh my god, no!" And I'm like, "No, like it's not stopping.
It down.
It's just leveling up."
Exactly.
Adjusting to this new normal or whatever
the whole. I honestly, I kind of don't like that term. The whole like.
No, I don't either, because I really like. It's like, yeah, it is, but like it isn't, because in a few years it'll just be like, okay, whatever. Not whatever, but...
Oh, I think people will forget, because that's what always happens. People will forget, and then what'll happen is like things will start going back to normal again, and people will forget that like, like other people can get you sick. Like, like we'll just forget about it. It'll just be like before eventually, right?
I'd imagine. I mean, I imagine masks are a common use for at least the next few years. I imagine we have a vaccine by next year, and things are hopefully starting to look kind of normal.
Right. A vaccine that works too.
A vaccine that works, right? I mean, that's important.
Not like a Bill Gates vaccine. You heard about that, right?
A little bit, not much though.
Oh no! Oh, dude. So he was on the news. He did an interview on the news, and they asked him like.
I think I was talking about.
They asked him about how the vaccine is going and everything, and he basically he didn't say it outright clearly, but it sounded like he was saying that like 80% of people were getting sick from the vaccine because of the type of vaccine that it is, right? And it's just like,
I know what you're talking about. About.
Well, that's not a good look for your vaccine, buddy.
No, not at all, man.
It's not.
No. Yeah, no, I think the remdesivir or whatever, that's the one that looks promising that we've seen. I think they were saying it's like, I don't remember if it was 78 or 88% effective in the tests that they've done, which, I mean, at first glance that sounds bad, but I'm pretty sure the flu vaccine is about the same every year. I mean, I could be wrong on that.
The same level of effectiveness, maybe.
Yeah.
This will be our first Google flu vaccine, basically like flu vaccine effectiveness by year, right? This will be our first Google right now.
Yeah, something else we wanted to start doing more of is fact checking when we're talking.
Well, yeah. Well, because I mean, we don't want to sound like complete idiots.
No, definitely not.
Right. So we have so there's some charts here. I have this is from the CDC. Basically, we have like cases and versus the control, and it looks like let me see, numbers enrolled, surveillance week. That one's a little bit hard to read. Let me see if I can find a. Okay, so. Oh, wow, that's interesting. It basically, it looks like it's been a little bit all over the place. Percent effective, it was 10% effective, measured 10% effective between 2004 and 2005. The highest effectiveness was 2010, 2011 years at 60%. And as soon as 2017, 2018, we were about 40%. There was also a big dip, 2014, 2015 years that were like that, the span of that year. Where it dipped down to 19%, but then the next year it was at 48%. So it looks like we've had a higher percentage of effectiveness in past years, but right now we're down considerably, about 20%. But that's a big improvement from where we kind of were in 2004, 2005.
Oh, for sure.
Yeah.
Yeah, I don't know. I hope things go back kind of normal because, I mean, something you got to remember is, like, especially small business owners, they're suffering, you know?
Oh, immensely. Well, so many people have just straight up lost their businesses, especially if they were in the restaurant business. Not to mention, there have been people who maybe had plans for this year. Maybe they invested in new properties and they were finally thinking, okay, I'm going to make it big time. And then it's like psych, and then they can't get their money back. They have to pay rent on these properties and things, and so then they're trying to kind of reason with like their landlords and things in these new properties that they've invested in, and say like, okay, look, like, I was planning on having like this business up and running. Now COVID's happened, and there are people now who have basically put their entire life savings into something, because that's what you do when you start a business. A lot of times you're putting it all on the line in the hopes that this thing will be successful. And now those people have they haven't seen their investment pay off, and they're in the hole their entire life savings. Yeah. And there's just nothing they can do about it.
Just my camera. But yeah, no, I agree. My uncle's a small business owner here in Elk Grove. And I went in to go pick up pizza one day, and they're struggling, man. You can't have people inside. You can only have people on the patio. I mean, like you said, a lot of restaurants especially, they're suffering. And I think that, when we look at how to respond to COVID, you can't just look at it from the point of view of people are going to get sick and they're going to die. What about the people that are going to lose their businesses, their livelihood, their jobs? What about how is that going to affect mental health, right? Exactly, and things like that. Yeah. What does that lead to?
You have to think about
all of these things are important.
Mm-hmm.
Good.
You have to think about all those things. I think that's really important. What you said about like how it affects people mentally too, especially. Yeah. You have to think like, something like the coronavirus, this kind of new virus that we have. And the scariest part isn't that it kills a lot of people. It's just that it's new and that we don't know a lot about it so much, right? And also its long-term effects. Like, when we have a virus like this where like people get it and then they aren't fully recovered for 7-8 months later, like they get it in January, they're still not fully recovered. You have people like my mom who have not regained their senses of taste and smell, and who have probably permanent scarring of the lungs now, which especially for someone like her who has asthma is like, it's like fucked up, because it's
Did your
like
mom have it?
Yeah, the doctors are almost completely sure. We were sure she had it before then, just because she had all the symptoms, dude. But they just didn't know to look for it, so she was never able to get a test. And then by the time they approved her test, it was like way too late after she got it. So it was like pointless. But I mean, kind of went off on a tangent there. But the idea, basically, I think it's important that you said about the whole mental health thing is because, how many lives are we going to lose in terms of like people, just committing suicide? Or losing their families or their livelihood. Like how many lives are going to be lost there, and how many lives are going to be affected. And so I feel like just in terms of economics and in terms of like public health, you have to kind of find like this balance. Like, okay, how do we balance these two things so that we're not doing more harm either way than we are good?
Yeah. Right? No, I agree. I think that, like I said, when talking about how to respond to COVID, you can't just look at COVID. There's so much that goes into these things. Yeah. I mean, I'm pretty sure, again, we might need to do another Google, and I have too much stuff running, so you're going to need to look it up. But I'm fairly certain that suicide rates have gone up. I could be wrong about that, but I mean, it would also make sense. I know that depression's at an all-time high.
Yep.
And like I said, if you're not getting sick from COVID, you're getting sick from something else. You know what I mean? Mm-hmm. And that is something that we need to look at, especially for people, like I said, who own a business. Mm-hmm. They're working now, all of a sudden they can't work. They have no income. They have no way to provide. They have no way to do anything. You've taken away their purpose.
Right.
Right. And
Yeah.
I'm not one to say, yeah, I'll open everything back up. That's not what I'm saying. I'm not saying that at all. I think that, we need to do it safely and effectively. And the key word is effective, right?
Right.
How do we do this in a way that keeps people safe, but also allows people to keep their livelihoods and not go out of business?
Yeah.
So it's a very complex problem that our politicians have to deal with.
I think they're really not equipped to deal with it. And I know a lot of people are upset at like Gavin Newsom, especially right now, and a lot of politicians in general, just for their response, or either their kind of response or their lack of response, or kind of inadequate response to the COVID pandemic. But the reality is that, like, these people are not equipped to deal with it. And while many of them may not be doing, a very good job, whether that's an opinion or kind of more of an observation, either way, the truth is just that, like, nobody saw this coming, really. That's not true, actually. People saw it coming, but nobody listened. Like, nobody. Exactly. Yeah. We were not at all prepared. I want to get to those statistics you mentioned, actually, because I brought them up. So according to the CDC, basically, anxiety. Well, first of all, during late June, they determined that something like 40% of U.S. adults reported struggling with mental health or substance abuse, up to 11% seriously considered suicide, 26% trauma/stressor-related disorder symptoms, increased in substance abuse, went up like 13%, and anxiety and depression symptoms is at about 31%. And we're talking about, like, of the total population. So that's a lot of people. That's significant. And if you consider, like, that say that amount of your workforce, for example, is suicidal, even if it was 11%, that is very significant, and it's going to have, like, a huge impact on you economically. That's going to have a huge impact on businesses and of course your GDP. I mean, it's kind of a given, but yeah. But yeah, it's all it all ties together. Like, all these things, they all are they don't exist in echo chambers. If someone is depressed or suicidal, and then you have, like, a whole group of people, significant millions of people who are depressed and suicidal, that is going to have a much broader effect on your economy and on your society as a whole, right?
Yeah, absolutely, I agree.
So
sorry.
Yeah, but you're right. It's complicated.
Yeah. Yeah, man. So, on the topic of COVID, because we haven't done this in a while, so I figured, a little catch up is good.
That's true.
You were at school. You were in SoCal when all this shit first started.
Yeah, we're taking it back now.
You were an RA, right?
Mm-hmm. Yep.
How was that experience?
Oh, God. Oh, it was absolutely insane. Oh, God. To go back there. To be honest with you, it was a lot of fun. To kind of have the whole school to yourself or whatever, even if you're an RA, it was like a lot of fun. But because then with whoever is left there too, you get to interact with them and you get to form, like, closer, stronger bonds with people. But it was especially crazy at first because I know a lot of, my own personal friends even were spreading a lot of misinformation and a lot of kind of concerning information through social media channels. They were posting things on their stories that were, kind of to me, I was like, this can't be true, so I would immediately question it. But for a lot of people, people were saying things like, they're going to shut down everything and you're not going to be able to leave your house and they're going to arrest you if they find you, like, walking outside and all. And I'm like, look, this is not going to happen. I don't know why you think this.
I would have friends in an authoritarian state that couldn't happen.
I know. But I had friends telling me, like, no, this is going to happen. Like, we need to get ready. And I'm like, no, that's not right. That's not right at all. But it was hard to get food.
Was it?
Because I don't have a car. So, and then what happened was the cafeteria. Obviously, they can't do their, like, open buffet style thing like they normally do. So what they started doing was kind of like prepackaged meals for students. Those were always shit. They're just bad.
Yeah.
But I think, you kind of get used to it after a while, and then people started leaving. But when they initially started issuing orders, when the government here in California started kind of issuing orders, I had a lot of people kind of coming to me with questions about like, do we have to leave campus and stuff like that? And at first the school wasn't making like a clear push to say that like you should leave, but then eventually a couple emails down the line, and as things kind of changed very rapidly day to day, I ended up issuing an email on like Thursday or Wednesday of a certain week in March, and they said that like we highly advise you to leave, and like most people left. Some people didn't leave, but ultimately that's what they wanted. They wanted as many people out as possible, and they couldn't make them leave, but they said like you should probably leave, basically is what they said. And so I had one resident in particular who came to me, I called him rather, because I was calling all my residents to make sure like, are you situated correctly? Are you doing what you need to do? Are you doing what's best for you and your situation? And I had one resident, and I told him, hey, first I found out that he had already gone home, and so he was like an hour, 2 hours, 3 hours, wherever he lives from campus, and he had left all his stuff in his room when he left, with the expectation that he was just going to be able to come back and grab it whenever he wanted to, or something like that, right? And so I told him like, hey, if there's some kind of government lockdown, or there's some kind of policy that's put into place that would prevent you from doing that, then you just won't be able to get your stuff. And he kind of freaked out for a minute, because he was like, what do you mean I won't be able to get my stuff? And we're like, we're not saying like you won't ever be able to get your stuff, but we just don't know when you'll be able to come back and get it. We may have to do something specifically for you, and try and find a way for you to like legitimately come back through the proper process to retrieve your items. And so I really told people, I was like, because I could feel that like something was going to go down soon. And then that Friday, sure enough, the lockdown order was issued. And all of a sudden, anyone who was off campus couldn't come back to campus. Anyone who's on campus, like, you have to stay where you are, basically. Or I think you could leave, but I know for sure that nobody could come onto campus. Like, they were not letting anyone onto campus. All the doors were locked. And it got really weird briefly. And then we kind of got used to that. And so kind of as the weeks go by, two of my residents stayed behind in the dorms. And so I formed kind of a much closer bond with them. And we ended, we'd have like our conversations, and we'd have inside jokes and stuff. And it was great. And then, cool. And I mean, there would be only like 7 people standing in line for their prepackaged meal at the cafeteria. And, for someone like me who eats 2 meals a day, I had already run out of swipes anyway, so I guess it kind of didn't matter. But, I went in, and one day I just had to tell them, I'm like, look, I can't pay for this. Like, I have no money. I have no more meal swipes. And they were just like, don't worry about it. We'll just write your name down and like keep a tally or whatever and figure it out. And then, about halfway through the whole, or 3/4 of the way through the whole semester, probably, I ended up finding out that housing and residential education was going to end up picking up the tab. So I was like, oh, wow, that's great. Yeah.
That's cool.
But it was cool. It was kind of weird, but it was also cool because, I met new people, and I grew closer to people that I probably wouldn't have otherwise, just because there wasn't that many people around. There's 7 people in line at the cafeteria. You meet someone, you become really good friends. So it was cool.
Yeah. Nice. Yeah. My experience was different than that. I was living at home, still am, in my room. That was interesting because, I mean, I'll be real. At the beginning, I was like, definitely one of those people that was like, this is just a bad flu. Like, I was like, this isn't that big of a deal. I got proved wrong very quick.
The pandemic's fake.
I wasn't going that far, but I was like,
Yeah.
Like the first week, 2 weeks, right? And then I was like, oh shit, never mind. Because it's like, oh, okay, this is a big deal, and if we're not careful, then a lot of people will get sick, and a lot of people will die.
Yeah.
I have grandparents that are older, and I before the pandemic was seeing my grandparents pretty regularly. And for a while I wasn't seeing them like at all, you know, and if I was, it was at their driveway and I was on the opposite end with a mask on and all that. But it was interesting because like I'd hang out if I wanted to see like my friends. I would have to like go to the park, and mom was like, make sure you're social distancing, you know, all that. Don't be around people, don't be close to people, don't do any of that. It was just really weird. I mean, now, and obviously I'm careful. I only see a few people, you know, like my friend Aaron, saw you a few weeks ago, you know, just a few people that I hang out with, and that's it. But yeah, for a while it was weird. Like no one was allowed at my house. I wasn't allowed to go to people's houses. No going in anybody's car, any of that. It was really weird. But yeah, I don't know. Finishing school was interesting because I was in 7 classes that semester, and I was already taking 2 online and then 5 on campus, and then going to taking 7 classes online. I was like, oh, fuck. You know, that was. Actually, it wasn't as much as I was expecting because a lot of my teachers were pretty accommodating and didn't actually give us too much stuff. But it was still interesting. Taking 7 classes online was fun. Teaches you a lot about self-discipline. I'll say that.
Yeah. I just failed. I had no self-discipline.
That's wild.
I was saying like 5 or 6 classes.
6 A's and a B.
Nice.
I ended with 6 A's and a B.
That's honestly amazing. That's great. Yeah.
I'm kind of surprised, to be real with you, but some of my classes weren't actually too hard. So, but you were saying,
yeah. Well, I mean, I feel like some of my classes weren't that hard either, but I screwed up. I screwed up, like seriously fucking bad. Yeah. There was I had 6 classes. I failed half of them. I failed 3.
Jeez.
And I kind of barely got by in another one. Then I did pretty good in the other 2. It was just between RA job, working 20 hours a week, being in the band. Partway through the pandemic, we recorded like a huge album. So I was in the studio for like a week and did nothing else. Like literally just night and day studio. And just playing drums, recording. And then 6 classes get transferred to online, and like I was already kind of struggling in a couple of them, and then everything just fell apart completely. And I started meeting people, and I wanted to spend time with people because I realized like I'm never going to see some of these people again, like probably in my whole life maybe. Yeah. So, and I had a lot of like unique experiences with people. Like shout out to Casey, super great friend, love you, Casey. But she was awesome. She lived right above me. And so me and her got I don't know, probably like pretty close, like as close as you could get to someone in like 2 months or whatever, probably. So yeah, we would hang out like every day. Sometimes we'd hang out like days back to back, but I don't know what I was saying, but but it was just it was hard for me. It wasn't even like the pandemic really existed because I was still like seeing people, and there was no social distancing or anything. I wore a mask at work. That was about it. But it was when I got back home, that was the shock. On June 1st, I was like, oh, this is my life.
Yeah, I remember that because by June I was, I had a few friends coming over. I was hanging out with them. That was really it. And I remember we talked, and you were like, "Nope, can't."
Nope.
I was like, "Damn, dude." Yeah, I mean, it was like that for a while.
We hung out
like once over summer, maybe twice.
Something like that. Yeah, it was.
I mean, I think I can count how many times we've hung out since you've been back, and mind you, you've been back for almost 6 months at this point.
Yeah, I think we've hung out like 4 times, maybe.
That's what I was gonna say. Like 4 times.
I saw you the other day. Went to Dutch, and then you came to my birthday, and then there was maybe like 2 times before that.
Yeah, that was it.
Exactly, like 4 times.
It was wild, bro.
That's so crazy. That's so bad.
I remember being in class the last day that we had like in class learning. It was my philosophy 152 course with my probably favorite teacher that I have had in community college, that I've had in college in general. And it was funny. So I had him on a Thursday, and so I had him Tuesday, Thursday. That Tuesday, he said, the Los Rios Community College District isn't going to close down until there are 5 confirmed cases within the Los Rios district. So 5 faculty, student, teachers, whatever. If there was 5, they'd go, okay, we'll shut down. And there was about 2. I think there was 2. Maybe 3, but I'm going to say 2. That Tuesday. That Thursday, there wasn't 5 cases, but because of the lockdown orders, it was probably the same week that all this stuff happened to you. The same week as those lockdown orders came in, it was like, well, no more on campus. And I remember talking to that professor, and that was interesting because, so you probably hear shit going on in the background, but I don't know. It was just weird because I was so used to going to class, being on campus, and I feel like this is relatable to anybody. You know, you were used to doing certain things, going to work, going to school, whatever it is, and then all of a sudden it's like, all right, nope. And it definitely took me a few weeks to get adjusted because when we were online, I started waking up at 10 o'clock. I started waking up, going to bed super late.
At 1 p.m. every day.
That's nuts, bro. I'm not kidding. Okay, I'll be real. I know you're not. I text you like, oh, when we hang it out at like 11, I don't get a response for a few hours. I'm like, the fuck?
Sleep. Yeah.
But even now, I wake up at like 10 o'clock. I set an alarm sometimes and wake up around like 8:30, 9 just so I can like get more stuff done. But because I was so undisciplined those first few weeks. And I was like, okay, no, like I need to like get on top of my grades and stuff. But
I like gradually lost my discipline. I was like,
really?
Because I had to be. I was like the most disciplined person. I remember one of my residents, he was calling me like the optimal human. He's like, you're like the optimal human, aren't you? Like you saw me waking up at 4 one day. And he's like, are you like the optimal human? I was like, definitely not. I'm like dead tired. My eyes are all red. Definitely not the optimal human, dude. But thanks for the compliment. Yeah, my discipline just like kept slipping and slipping. And now I have very like minimal discipline.
Shit happens.
So it's gonna be like a fucking long path to get back where I want to be. But
I mean, it is what it is, right? I mean, I had to start introducing some sort of discipline because I wanted to get decent grades this semester because I just transferred them at Sac State now, and I'm in all upper division classes except for one. I had to take one lower division class for my philosophy major.
This tea is really good. I'm sorry, but go on.
So I
have a headache, so like warm tea is like great for headaches. But sorry, go on.
Yep, I agree. What was I saying? Oh yeah, some sort of discipline. But I the past few weeks especially, I had to start introducing something because I was like, ooh, I'm not going to do good in my classes if I don't like get my shit together. Because we're about halfway through, a few weeks past halfway through now, and it was halfway through the semester. I went, okay, I've got time to like still do good, and it's not that I was doing bad necessarily, but it wasn't at where I wanted to be, and I'm still not in some classes. Like I gotta get them up, and that's fine. But yeah, it's been interesting. Taking classes online, I liked online classes, but like I would take like 1 or 2 a semester. And now it's like, okay, I'm in 5. And learning a foreign language in an online class is interesting.
You're learning a foreign language?
Yeah, I'm taking, because I have a foreign language requirement and I'm in a Punjabi class. And it's not too bad because I go to the Zoom meetings and that helps a lot. And I took Punjabi classes at the Gurdwara when I was a kid. So I remember how to read and write. Yeah, like the reading, like the alphabet, the shit, what are they called?
The dots and the little swirlies.
Yeah, like the stuff that you add on to them. I don't know why I'm forgetting the name of this. God, that's so bad, but whatever.
I definitely don't know the name.
but
yep.
So thankfully I had remembered like all that stuff, so it wasn't too bad. It's just learning how to like speak it's been a pain in the ass. But like that's a fun class to take online because it's like, well, trying to learn a whole new language and you don't get to interact with people the same way. It's different. But
I feel like actually like interacting with people and hearing it and speaking it is a big part of actually learning the language. So like when you can't do that, it's like
for sure. Thankfully, he puts us in breakout rooms, and there's like I'd say about half the class, maybe a third of the class, is fluent in it. They already speak it, but they don't know how to read and write it.
But you know how to read and write. More
yeah, I could read and write, but I can't speak it. It's usually flipped.
So that actually works out for you because they can speak it, so they can help you learn how to speak.
Exactly. And so what he does is whenever he puts us in breakout rooms, he makes sure that there's at least one person that's fluent in it. The advanced group is what he calls them. He makes sure there's at least one person from the advanced group to help the rest of us and make sure that we know what we're doing, how are we saying this properly, and all that stuff. So it's actually not too difficult. I like that class. And I will say one of the cool things about online is in my history of ancient philosophy course, only like 6 people go to the Zoom meetings. So you like no one goes because it's not mandatory. Okay. And I go to them because it helps me understand the material better. I think the professor's cool and we get to talk and interact and stuff. So that's one of the cool things is it's a really small group of people talking about these things. It's the same thing in my political theory class, which is basically just political philosophy. It's the same thing. We all get to exchange ideas, and there's not too many people, so you kind of get to know everyone and what they think, and it's pretty cool. So I guess that's like look on the bright side of it, I guess. That's something that you wouldn't necessarily be able to do on campus because there's just a lot of people.
Yeah, I guess that's true. And yeah, I actually randomly just ran into my Spanish teacher at In-N-Out right now, but and I was talking to him. Funny. Yeah, it was very random, but I was talking to him about how like I think it would be better if things were, how they were, kind of more what humans are used to and adapted to, social interaction and such. But yeah, like there's some good. Like I know a lot of people enjoy working from home, for example.
Yeah,
it's nice. You wake up in your own house. You could wake up, right before you got to go to work if you want. You can wake up and make a cup of coffee and like sit down on the couch and look out the window and open the shades and kick your feet up for a minute, and then you just turn your computer on and boom, you're at work just like that.
Right. Right.
So it's like, yeah, it sucks, but yeah, there's some good side to it. I don't think the good outweighs the bad, but
no, absolutely not.
Yeah.
Yeah. No, I completely agree. But I think trying to find the positive within dark times, I think, is important.
Yeah, these aren't even really dark times, though.
No, well, yeah, that's true. But you get what I'm saying. It's a period of time where things are kind of on pause, right? To an extent. It's a period of time where there's a pretty drastic change. And I think that it's important to try to find, like I said, some sort of positive in a time where a lot of people are struggling. And that's probably different for everyone. Finding something to keep you occupied. I go skate sometimes. Although I don't do it as much as I used to. Obviously, this is another thing that we're going to be doing again. So I don't know. I think it's an important thing, though, is find something that brings you some sort of joy. Because the reality is we're probably going to be doing this stuff for a while. I'd imagine until next year, at least. I
think on average, most pandemics last something like 18 months. So
yeah.
My prediction is like around summer, like June, maybe.
Yeah, one of my professors was saying that if and it was taking into account the vaccine, it was saying if people take the vaccine, wear masks, and then you kind of just generally let the rest do what it's going to do, whatever. We should be sort of back to normal by, like you said, May or June.
Yeah. Yeah, I think
if people are doing those things. Because I know certain, like the Spanish flu lasted 3 years. That was like the big pandemic, and this is considered the big pandemic of this century.
Right. funny how there are people who like know this is going to happen, and yet we don't prepare for it at all.
It's kind of funny, interesting.
Yeah, and, it's like history doesn't repeat itself.
Fun fact: there used to be a pandemic response team on the federal level.
Well, there probably should have been one.
There used to be one.
Yeah, there should have been one. Things happen. That's the thing, is that like things don't happen until they do happen. And then if you want to go around saying like, oh, well, the chances that there's going to be a pandemic are 0.4% or something, it's not a good chance it's going to happen. But it's going to happen eventually.
We know that things like this happen generally every century. We know
like, there are earthquakes.
This isn't uncommon. Right.
What's the chance that there's going to be an earthquake? Well, the chance has been like extremely high that there's going to be an earthquake in California for like the last 2 decades we've been due for like a huge earthquake that's going to like rip San Francisco in half or something and like shake it to rubble. But like there has been no earthquake. Doesn't mean there won't be one. It's coming, but like hasn't come yet.
And that's a good example actually, because of that knowledge, and because of there was a massive earthquake. I don't remember exactly when it was. It was like
the one where the double bridge collapsed and a lot of people died.
Yeah. I don't remember exactly when that was, but since then, a lot of San Francisco building codes in the Bay Area in general, you have to build buildings that are resistant to earthquakes. Like they have to be.
They do have to be. Yeah.
Fun fact: there's almost no buildings made of brick on the West Coast, and the reason and you see it on the East Coast a lot because earthquakes aren't a big problem there. Here, that building's just gonna tumble down. Bye. Yeah. It's gone.
Exactly. Yeah. But
so it was being prepared, even though it hasn't happened yet. It's kind of inevitably going to, and they are prepared.
Exactly.
And that was something that we definitely should have done with COVID. We didn't know it was going to be COVID, but we knew, okay, every 100 years ish, a pandemic happens. We should probably have some type of response team to deal with that in case it does.
Yes.
And then we got rid of the pandemic response team, and then a few years later, there was a pandemic. So
smart,
the
right?
irony of it.
Smart. Yeah, it is very. That's
very
like
ironic. One of those things.
That's very ironic.
Yeah, I mean that's one of those things. It's like better to have it and not need it than need it and not have it.
Exactly. And I think the biggest problem, really, I mean, yeah, like that's a problem if you just aren't like prepared. If the government isn't prepared, for example, or if you're not structurally prepared for something like an earthquake, that's bad. But mental preparedness, that's big too.
Absolutely.
And your society, like in terms of your society being kind of mentally aware, not only of what can happen, but what will inevitably happen, and being ready for those things, not only practically in the physical world, but in their minds, being mentally prepared for things, I think is a huge problem. I think that's something that we're like really, really terrible at, just like as humans in general. 5 years, we forget that we that things can happen, and
I'd imagine a decade from now, 5 years from
people will forget.
People are never going to talk about this.
With the earthquake, well, I think they'll talk about it like in school and stuff, but
in school though, but it's not going to be something where it's like, this could happen. It's like history. Oh, yeah,
and that's actually a problem. Is when people pretend that history is the past and it can't happen again, and it's like, no, actually it will happen again inevitably. We know that it will. And this is the thing with the earthquakes that I think a lot of people are forgetting, because we haven't had a huge earthquake in a long time. And it's completely faded from people's memories. I mean, you have a new generation that's being born, people like me who have never experienced an earthquake, and I've lived here all my life. And California always really used to have this reputation of like earthquakes, and you guys get earthquakes, don't you? And there were movies about like LA getting ripped in half and sinkholes and aftershock. I think that was a movie, right?
San Andreas is another one.
San Andreas, yeah. So they're like all these movies where like California just gets like completely screwed and by earthquakes. And like we haven't had an earthquake. So I think a lot of people are starting to think like, oh,
we've
this
had
is a
earthquakes,
joke.
but we haven't had any big ones.
Exactly. So I think a lot of people are like really forgetting that like this is gonna happen. Like plate tectonics are a real thing.
Yeah. I mean, and it's inevitable. We know about when these things happen. We have an idea.
Like the fault is gonna do a little. Wait, it's a little rubber band thing when the tension breaks, and it's gonna go, and it's gonna shake, and the crack.
I had to take a geography class. It was one of my general ed requirements, and I don't remember if the plate tectonics in California are ones that go like you can't. People listen to the audio. You can't tell what I'm doing.
Right, they go top, underneath bottom, each other, top, bottom.
Yeah, or if it's one side. Where they rub side to side.
Yeah, I think they are side to side, but I don't remember.
I don't remember where California is.
I know that you find a lot of those ones that go underneath each other. You find those under the oceans a lot. That's why you have they create lava under the ocean. Have you heard about that?
Volcanoes under the
yeah. Actually, the biggest.
That's what Hawaii is.
Yeah, I was gonna say like Hawaii is like the biggest
crack and then lava. Yeah, exactly. And it's interesting because you can look at each island and you can see how they've moved over time and how they progress. It's interesting. Each island progressively just gets smaller and smaller and smaller, and on every single one of them, you can see what was. Well, I don't know on every single one, but at least the ones I've been to, you can see. Oh, that was a volcano.
Yeah.
And I've been to 3 islands that I can remember. I've been to Kauai, and I've been to the center of what that volcano is. Maui, same thing. We drove around it. And Oahu. I hiked up that one.
Yeah. It's so funny how people will like deny that things like plate tectonics exist when you can literally look at the planet and like see it.
I've never heard people denying it. Where have you heard that?
Oh, people will deny it. There's definitely people who will deny it.
Like flat earther type people?
Yeah, I'd probably kind of put them in that same level of like you can observe that the earth is round and yet you say that it is not round. And no matter what evidence you bring against them, it's like no, that's fabricated or that evidence isn't legitimate. There's always a problem, no matter what it is.
It's culty, bro.
It is culty. I mean,
it's weird.
The people get in this mentality, though. It's not just with things that seem crazy like flat Earth. I mean, people will get into this mentality with all kinds of things. All you have to do is get sucked into kind of this group mentality and subscribe to an ideology and get hooked on an idea. And no matter what anybody says, whatever it is that you say is right is right. It doesn't matter what evidence is brought against you. It doesn't matter how rational and logical the argument is. It doesn't matter how much it makes sense. Your position will always be the position that is the correct position because you are the elected, you are the righteous one. You know what's right. And these other people, they don't know what they're talking about or they're illegitimate and what they say doesn't matter and they should or they should be silenced even. So
I think the 2 most common things throughout history and even today that's done with is religion and politics. And historically, those 2 were very intertwined. Like you said, you get into this mentality that I'm right, you're wrong. And it's often used as an excuse to do certain things that are questionable. Historically, you can look at the Crusades. That's one example.
Oh, sure.
I mean, that's ancient. Not ancient, but that's a long time ago. Now
it's a little old for us.
more recent, you can look at colonialism throughout the world. You can look at the idea of manifest destiny. That's one.
Oh, that's fucking, yeah.
You know, this is our God-given right to do these things, and you can't tell me that I'm wrong.
I guess if God gave you your life and your life is yours, then I guess technically you do whatever you want. Right?
Yeah. Yeah.
It's my life. I can do whatever I want.
Yeah.
Right? God gave me free will. He gave me a life, and my purpose is to conquer the West. Let's go.
So you know what question I'm going to ask now, right? since you decided to bring a free will.
Sure. Oh, no.
You ready to go down a rabbit hole?
Let's do it. Let's go.
Do we have free will? I know we talked about this recently. But
We did talk about this recently. That was a really good conversation.
Yeah, it was.
What do you think?
I don't know. Okay. I think that... Okay, I'll put it like this. Practically, I think we should live our lives as if we do and not really concern ourselves with things like that on the day-to-day basis, because I think that's just going to stress us out for no reason.
It's impractical, yeah.
It's very impractical. It doesn't... Because the reality is this. It doesn't matter if we do or don't, because from our perspective, we do, and we should live our lives according to that. I mean, that's just generally what I think. Mm-hmm. Like I said, I think it depends. It depends on a multitude of things. First off, what is time, right?
That's an important one.
That's an important one in determining free will.
I feel like that's one that your average person kind of doesn't normally think of either. They're like, time. What does time have to do with this?
Because, so I'll put it like this. If time is, let's say, a string, right?
Yeah.
Or a line, whatever it is. And this is what it is. And let's say we're right here, right? We're on X point and we're going from A to Z, whatever, right? Mm-hmm. If that time is already set, we don't have free will because it's set. You can't change it.
Right.
If it's a constantly changing and moving thing, I think there's an argument for both sides. I think you can say that we do have free will and you can say that we don't. I think you could say that we do because the easy argument, I think, would be because it's a constantly changing thing and nothing is set. I think it's easy to draw the conclusion that, so we, based on the things that happen, not just on Earth, but in the whole universe, based on all these different things, this is what's going to change throughout time. And then there's the other argument that it doesn't matter about time, doesn't even matter. There's this idea in psychology, and it's that every decision you make, you're making it based on previous experiences that you've had. It's almost like you really couldn't make a different decision. You're mm-hmm. gonna make the decision based on previous experiences and previous conversations, whatever it is. And so in that view, you wouldn't necessarily have free will.
Right. And I think the big one too with the whole like time thing, this is the way I look at it, because I would say that probably you don't have free will. I'd say that probably there's no such thing as free will. And I would say that because I think that time probably works like how that first scenario that you mm-hmm. Or that first example that you gave of how maybe time works. Like maybe time works like you have an infinite line, and mm-hmm. if you imagine the point in time that we're at, that's like a point on the line. Mm-hmm. And we're just kind of moving along this line, and there may be other lines, and we consider these to be like parallel timelines. And this is integral in the theory of like the 11 dimensions, for example, or the 10 dimensions, where we kind of imagine our three-dimensional space, XYZ axis, and then you have the fourth dimension of time. So you imagine, like a three-dimensional slideshow extending. That's your time, that we perceive. And then what you do is you take that timeline, and then we create another XYZ axis with all of the possible timelines. So it would be like every moment in time on one axis, and then it'd be this way and then the other way, and then it gets a little more complicated beyond that. I don't really remember a lot of the more technical aspects of the theory of the 10 dimensions, but that's really interesting stuff. But if we consider that time works that way, then I think for sure, like you can't have free will, like you said.
No way.
It wouldn't be possible. But I think the real kicker is that we can't see the future. So we obviously, there's the theory from psychology that talks about how every decision we make, everything that we say and that we do is based off of our past experiences. It's kind of, like you can't know what your next thought is before you've had the thought. Yeah. So I know this was an example used in the car that one time when we were talking. And it's like, I can't tell you what my next thought is until I know the thought, so I can't in some ways it seems like I can't really decide what to think. We know to some degree we can decide what to think. Like if I want to think about, a certain kind of food, and I can think about it. Like if I want to say, I want to think about cherries. I think of cherries now, and you can imagine cherries in all sorts of different ways, but like I consciously made this decision. I picked the food that I wanted to think of, and I thought of that food. I want to think of cherries. Right. So yeah, that was a conscious decision that I made, sure. But it was, even that you could argue still that like that was based on a bunch of other things. Even though I consciously made that decision, could I have made another decision? And we would think, retrospectively, like, yeah, of course, you could have picked, broccoli, man. Like, you could have picked whatever.
Right. Hey, maybe the color of my sweatshirt made you think of cherries. Maybe you never know.
Exactly. It's
there's
like,
but no. Different... I think the question you just brought, and one thing I actually want to ask the people listening to this to do, just so you can get the idea of what we're talking about, is try to tell me what not tell us, but try to figure out what your next thought is going to be. You can't do it because, like you said, you can't see into the future. You don't know what the future is. Yeah. And because of that, how do you know that you could have made... Well, not because of... I'm trying to think of... I know
what you're trying to say. It's basically, you don't know the future until the future's the present, right? And so you can only think of other possibilities retrospectively. You can't actually think in terms of the future because you haven't experienced the future. You can think like, oh, maybe this will happen or maybe that will happen, but you don't know. You don't know until the moment's already come to pass. And at that point, you can only think in your mind about, oh, I could have done this or I could have done that. But whatever it is that you did, there's no way to change that. There's no changing what has happened. Unless you could see the future and you knew for certain what was going to happen. Yeah.
If you could see, if you knew what the future was, or the different possibilities of the future, whatever, depending on different theories. But if you knew what the future was, then you'd be able to have free will.
That's what I would say. I would say definitely. I would say that if you can't know the future, then you can't really have free will, and you'll never know the future because, as far as we know, there's no way to really know the future with any degree of certainty. Like you can make predictions and things within a degree of accuracy even. Right. But you're not going to know what happens if you do X, Y, Z. You're not going to be able to see like the outcome. You're not going to see how your life plays out if you decide to eat pizza one day as opposed to like, anything else, a burrito, tacos, go get Mexican or go get Italian food. Like you're not going to be able to see for certain like how things will play out differently. You can only speculate in your mind, right? And this is kind of an obvious thing. It's like, of course, this is all things that we think. These are all thoughts in our minds. But if they're all thoughts in our minds, like, see, this is how I would think of it, is that like we don't really have free will because we have no other choice that we can make other than the one that we make. Right. But we don't know what that is until we've made it. Right. So.
No, I agree. I had another point to make, but it's okay.
It's like trippy. There's like people listening. They're like, no, I have free will. I could do what I want.
See, I used to be like, no, we have free will. And then now I'm like, maybe we do, maybe we don't. I don't. But like I also said, I also don't think it matters. Mm-hmm. I think that from our perspective, we do. And yeah. But I still think it's interesting to ponder, do we have free will? Now, I think that there's shitty arguments or people will do dumb shit. Oh, because I don't have... Oh, or no, free will doesn't exist. Everything is fated, whatever. It's something that Cicero talked about. He was a Roman philosopher. And he called it the lazy argument. He said that people that think that things are fated, that could lead people to not do anything because they think that whatever's meant for them is gonna happen. Yeah. And that's just how it works. And he was like, that's the problem with thinking that you don't have free will to that extent, because you just think that things are going to happen and things are going to work out and you don't have to do anything.
It's like,
right?
no
And
matter
that's
what
why I
I
think it's
do or
important
what
that-
I don't do. It's
Right.
like, it doesn't matter.
And that's
either
why
way.
I think it's important from a practical lens, just go, okay, I'm going to live my life as if I have it, even if I don't.
Right.
Because the reality is, if you all of a sudden go, I don't have free will, then nothing matters, whatever, you go total nihilistic, then
Yeah.
where did that lead you?
Yeah, it's
You know?
true. And it definitely seems that way. So at least practically speaking, no matter what the case is, like, I think we have to agree that we should act as though we do in fact have a choice, when we decide to, enroll in college or apply for a job like that, that we do have a choice in doing that. Because consciously it seems like we are choosing these things, but maybe we don't actually have another choice.
Right.
Which is like trippy to think about.
It is super trippy to think about.
Super trippy to think about.
I think my favorite things in philosophy, ideas in philosophy that I've studied so far and that I just like to talk about and think about are like stuff like that, philosophy of mind things where it's like, do we have free will? Do we not? Whatever. And then ethics, I think is super interesting.
Yeah, I'm in ethics right now, and I didn't realize that it was going to literally just be a philosophy class. Very interesting stuff sometimes that we talk about.
Yeah, I liked my ethics course a lot. I had a really good ethics professor. Although I did hear one thing that was interesting, and it was that ethics, I don't know the whole reasoning why, and I'm not going to even try to explain it, but the idea was that ethics shouldn't necessarily be considered philosophy, and I was like, that's interesting. I don't know why, but when I saw that, I was like, that's interesting. I have to go find it. I think it's somewhere in one of my textbooks, but on some of the notes or some shit. But yeah, no, I think that's an interesting idea. But in terms of studying ethics, that's what my focus is for my philosophy major. And I have to take 2 ethics courses, 2 more. So I'm probably gonna take those next semester. And now we're back talking about college.
That's super cool, actually, because I'm just getting like a minor in philosophy, so I'm just kind of going to be touching on the basics of everything, but you actually diving a little bit deeper into something specific like ethics, for example, which I don't understand how you could think that. How would you think that, like, or how would someone think that ethics isn't philosophy?
So here's the reason, and I think the general idea was this. It was that philosophical ideas don't necessarily deal with things in a practical lens, right? Not all the time. And I think that's a poor argument, but just I think that it goes, philosophy doesn't necessarily deal with things that are practical. And if ethics is a practical thing, then why should ethics be considered philosophy? Now, that goes on the idea that ethics is practical and not abstract. I personally think ethics are practical. I don't think they exist in some abstract form at all. But like I said, it's an interesting idea. I don't necessarily buy it. I think it's like, I think this is definitely philosophy, considering, you can study. There's different studies of ethics. There's different ethical theories. Like I said, my philosophy major is focusing on ethics and then politics and law, but it's mainly ethics. So I don't know. I think ethics is an interesting thing to study. So far, I've liked it. I've only taken 1 course, but in my other classes, we've talked about it. We've talked about different ethical theories just because it gets brought up. Like, Socrates was one of the first people to bring up a question that dismantles divine command theory. And he did this like 1,500, maybe 2,000 years before about 1,000 years before divine command theory was this really big thing.
Yeah, and divine command theory was basically this idea that
morality is dependent on God.
God says is right, basically. God says it.
Morality is dependent upon God. That's what divine command theory is. And the question Socrates asked, and it's a question that's, you ask this question, it starts to dismantle this theory, is what God commands right, or does God command something because it's right? If if whatever God commands is right, then if God commands me to, well, I'm not going to use me. If God commands someone to shoot a stranger in the face, is that right?
Right.
You know, and then the other thing is this: how can you verify that God commanded you to do anything?
Yeah,
you can't. Nobody. You can't. You know. And then the other thing is this: or does God command something because it is right? That question is what creates a lot of problems for religious doctrine.
It doesn't work.
Because if God commands something because it is right, then that means morality exists outside of God. And if God is commanding it, and if God has to command it because it is right, that means God is not all powerful. And you can see where I'm going. That goes
Which breaks down the idea of what God is. Right.
In monotheistic religions, that God is all powerful, all good, and all knowing.
Exactly. Yeah. Which is kind of the three pillars of the God argument. Right. Yeah. So anytime you want to argue about God, you kind of have to consider this argument that God is all knowing, all powerful, and what was the other one?
All knowing, all powerful, and all good.
Yeah, all good.
So this was something that I did. So I had to write a paper on this. I wrote a whole paper about how morality and religion and God need to be separate.
Yeah.
Because my argument was that morality exists because we say it exists, and for no other reason than that. Mm-hmm. It exists because we agree on certain things from a practical lens because they make sense. Like don't murder, right? Yeah. And that's not an absolute rule, you know, where but ever.
In general, it's kind of like this socially enforced rule where there's I mean, like murder is an extreme example, but we can see this even down to like the kind of more subtle taboos of our culture. You know, like these are all kinds of things that are enforced, that we enforce, that each of us see as we know, oh, you don't do that or you don't do this, you know?
Right. And so my argument was that morality is practical and that it's man-made.
Right.
And then I took an idea that you see in more pantheistic religions, Baha'ism, Sikhism, and interestingly enough, ancient philosophers too. A lot of them believed in pantheism. And it was that if God does exist, and if God is a higher being than us, and if morality is a man-made thing, then isn't it weird that we are describing this said higher being with something we created? We're describing this thing that we don't understand with something we created to try and understand it. Mm-hmm. You know what I'm saying?
Yeah, and honestly, I feel like religions and kind of like religious writings and ideas will try to get around this idea of God being this sort of incomprehensible either being or thing. You know, people believe different things, but we'll try to get around it by saying like, oh, we can never understand God, or like we'll never be able to understand God. Like we need to accept the reality that like God is beyond our comprehension. You know, I think I feel like it kind of gets used to kind of like skirt around like, you know, this idea that like God ought to be explained or make sense. It's like, no, God just doesn't make sense. Sorry, you just don't. We can't understand. It's just beyond us. You know? And that's kind of used as an excuse to justify kind of like ignorance and it's, you know, like cult like behavior. So
I think one thing that's interesting is the anthropomorphization of God.
Yes,
I personally don't believe that. But
people call God he. I'm like,
right. I think that's
God.
So weird.
What even makes you think this is a being we're talking about?
Right.
Yeah.
You know, I think it's just interesting because, like I said, we anthropomorphize God, and it's like, okay, hold on. First off, how long has the universe been around? Right? Humans didn't even exist. We're not even a blink. We're like part of a blink. Right?
If even.
You look at life on Earth. Humans have existed for the modern anatomical human has existed for 130,000 years, I believe. Some evidence suggests up to 300,000 years, but 130,000 years is the general agreed upon thing. At least that's what I remember from my anthropology class.
Which is really, it's probably longer, but yeah.
Right. Even if it's 300,000 years, even if it's 1,000,000 years, that
It's
is
still-
nothing.
Compared to the 13.7, just looked it up, billion
And
year
so
old
that-
age of the universe.
And then, if God has allegedly existed for all time, why is it that only now we are created in God's image? Why is it after all this time, now, this has happened?
Well, you
If
see,
God has allegedly been
time
this
works
being-
different for God, bro.
Yeah,
13 million years is like a day for God. I mean, it actually says that in the Bible, that this
Yeah, I
idea
know.
that like God,
God's timing is different.
his time is different than our time, yeah.
Yeah.
Which actually I think there are a lot of things in books like the Bible and ideas about God that actually make a lot of sense if you actually take them out of that framework of religion and this kind of box. I think this is the thing I dislike the most about a lot of religions, is that I feel like we tend to put God into a box,
Yeah.
but
I
it's
agree.
God, so it's like, why are you trying to put God in a box? Why are you trying to say God's like this or God's like that? Or why are you trying to say
don't know.
you can communicate with God? Like, you have like priests like who can act as almost like intermediaries or preachers. But
That's interesting
anyways.
that you say that. You grew up Catholic, right?
yeah, dude, had it shoved
That's
down my throat my
interesting
whole
that
life,
that's your
so-
view on that. Priests or pastor or whatever are like that kind of like, here's us.
Yeah,
here's
they're
God,
seen as
here's where
they're
they
seen
go.
as like this holy figure. Yeah, priests are seen as like this holy figure. They literally stand above you on this altar,
I
and
know.
it's like they're there to help you, like what do you call it? Like they make the whole thing happen. They do the mojo, Yeah.
So here's what's funny. In Christianity, and there's differences between Christianity and Catholicism. My Christian friends have always been like, no, that's not what we're taught. But everybody that's Catholic that I know goes, yeah, that's the role of priests.
Mm-hmm.
I just think that's interesting. But
because that's how it is. That's what
that's how it's
feels
portrayed.
like. That's the social
Yeah.
environment, is this kind of, it's more hierarchical. Whereas I
Yeah,
feel like when
yeah.
you have or hierarchical, I should say, adding fucking syllables, but it's, I've been to both like kind of to Christian and Catholic churches, because my dad, he likes to go to like Christian churches more, where they get like legitimately preachy, and they will like sing, and they have energy, and they they're invigorated with passion.
Yeah.
And it's totally different thing. You still have like a stage, and you have the band up there, and you'll have a preacher and stuff, but it's totally different vibe. The preacher's not, in my experience at least, you don't see a lot of preachers who are saying like, or even acting like, you come to God through me,
Right.
It's more like you nurture your own relationship with God. It's like that kind of thing, you become closer to God, and like maybe we can help each other become closer to God, but they're not usually saying like this and this, and you got to do this, and you got to come through me, or whatever, Not that priests necessarily say anything like that either, but it's a different social dynamic.
Yeah, that's super interesting.
Yeah.
I took a religious studies course or a world religions course, and Christianity was one of the ones that we studied, and learning about the differences between, or rather why the Catholic Church, and then at the time it called the Eastern Orthodox Church, their differences was interesting. And I think that, I don't remember exactly why it happened, but I know that there was some disagreement as to why, or not why, basically the idea that you were talking about of the role that certain people play. Like, I know in the Eastern Orthodox Church there is no pope. That doesn't exist. That's something unique to Catholicism.
Yep.
That you don't see that in any other branch of Christianity. There's nobody that plays that role. It's like, no, you're an individual. There's no hierarchy in terms of the relationship with God or whatever you want to say. This is on you to do, and you don't go through other people in order to reach that. Mm-hmm. This is something that everybody can do. And that was one of the reasons that I think that they split. Yeah, I don't know. That's interesting. I had another point to make, but I forgot. Oh, yeah.
Kind of. Okay.
Something else. Oh, sorry, go ahead. No, go ahead.
I was going to say, kind of going back to this idea of like putting God in a box. Like, I wanted to kind of touch on this idea that kind of that me and you have more or less, that God is within all things. I feel like there's a couple ideas kind of closely related to this that I think a lot of times people are resistant to, especially if they subscribe to a certain religious ideology or something like that.
Yeah.
And it's this idea that like God can't be something that great, which would be like literally everything. Like God can't be everywhere and within everything, you know. And, you know, like I said before, people have their different conceptions and ideas of God and what God is. And I think that's only normal. But, you know, I think that you can't really put God in a box, because if God is at all what we think God is, then God would probably be bigger than everything, a part of everything, within everything, as well as outside of it. Like it would be, God would be literally all.
So know, there's this
in some way.
So there's two things. This past year, I've tried to learn a lot more about Sikhism, and one thing that I think it's one like not verse line. What people say verse in Gurbani is he says I'm trying to remember what he says. I think it's Sab Gobind hai, Gobind bin nahi koi, which means everything is God, there is nothing except God.
How trippy is that?
And it's really the idea that God is within everyone and everything.
Yeah.
God is within you. It is within me. And instead of reaching out to try to find it and connect to whatever that is, you have to reflect within yourself, which to me, that is a beautiful idea. I like that idea a lot.
Yeah.
Because I think one of the things it does is it forces you to look at yourself as an individual, and it forces you to reflect on who you are as a person. And the other thing I think it does is that if God is a part of everything and is within everyone, that gives you, in essence, no reason, no ability almost to hate others, because then you're hating the same thing you're a part of. You know what I mean?
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
I think that for me, at least, it's a teaching of empathy. You know, that's something I try to get practical lessons out of religion.
We should talk
any
about
religion.
Empathy. We should talk.
Yeah,
about
absolutely.
Empathy. Yeah, but
I try to get practical lessons from religion, any religion. Obviously, Sikhism is the one that I follow. But I've done it with others as well. I've tried to learn from Islam, Christianity, and that idea that I am a part of the same thing as all these other people, therefore I should treat these people the same way I would treat myself. It's the golden rule in the Bible. Treat others the way you want to be treated. Love thy neighbor the way you would love yourself. It's
right, yeah.
It's a simple idea that it's in a lot of religions. It's said in different ways, but it's the same idea. And I think it's the importance of having almost radical empathy for people and coming from an understanding, regardless of who someone is, what their background is, you know, understand if someone thinks differently than you, understand why they think differently than you. If someone believes something else from you, why do they believe these things? Engage in a dialogue with them. That's the way that you actually learn people or learn about people.
Exactly.
And it's the way that you can find empathy.
And that's also the way that you can change people, not by trying to change them, but like I always use Daryl Davis as like the example, right? Because
I love him.
Yeah, dude. African American pianist, jazz piano player, super
Amazing
badass
musician.
dude.
Yeah.
and he just got to know, and just by getting to know KKK members, the KKK members themselves, you know, like he didn't, at least he claims like he didn't try to convert them or anything, but just by them knowing him, they just realized that they were wrong about their beliefs. They like that this idea that like black people are inferior, you know, they just realized that,
right.
Oh, that's kind of dumb. You know, like this guy's smarter than me, you know? And
he's got an amazing quote, and I'm going to go stalk your Instagram to find it because you have it on one of your stories, I think. Which account? Is it your personal account?
Personal, yeah.
Which one's that?
The upside down picture, True Josh Columbus.
Okay, cool. Go follow Josh.
Or don't.
No, it's not. It's your other one.
Is it?
Yeah, it's your other one. Oh. I just looked right now.
My bad.
I think it's in
Sorry.
PSA.
Yeah.
So the quote that he says is, "Ignorance breeds fear, for we fear what we do not understand. Fear breeds hate, for we hate what makes us afraid. Hate breeds destruction, because we want to destroy what we hate. The cure for ignorance is education. If there is no ignorance, there is nothing to fear. If there is nothing to fear, there is nothing to hate. If there is nothing to hate, there is nothing to destroy." I think that is a fucking amazing idea.
It's totally badass.
I seriously, I think that it's such a, not simple. No, yeah, it is. I mean, it really is a simple thing when you really think about it. It's by having empathy and trying to understand someone, by seeking knowledge and engaging in dialogue, you can really change someone. Because, again, like you said, ignorance breeds fear. If you have a conversation with someone and you start to show them that, oh, I'm kind of ignorant, then guess what? They're no longer fearful of whatever it is they're fearful of.
Yeah.
Right? You go down
understanding just breaks all of that down. Because yeah, I think this is actually fairly common. People generally, and I think it's often misconstrued as racism, but I think generally if there's like a culture that you don't understand, like you might have a really hard time interacting with people from that culture. Like if you grew up in the kind of a Mexican household, or a very like Catholic traditional Mexican household, for example, you might have a hard time understanding and communicating with someone who's from Detroit and grew up in gang territory, you know?
Right.
So there's just going to be a cultural disconnect there. Or if you grew up in a wealthy Caucasian middle-class household and you tried to communicate with, this person who grew up in like a traditional kind of Mexican household, assuming there isn't like a language barrier, there's going to be, there's going to be kind of a cultural disconnect. There's going to be a difference in the way that you see the world. But the idea of radical empathy, I think, is something that actually could help us a lot. And I think just the idea of having empathy more is really something that we need to kind of refocus on. And I mean that we should do that in like a genuine manner. Because I think that right now, and I think you see this a lot, you see people kind of, especially like people will post things on social media, right? Sure. Which is where we see the emergence of a lot of things nowadays. You kind of saw, I think it's still out there, this sort of pro-empathy movement, as it was sort of denoted.
It's not really empathetic, though.
But yeah, what it seemed more like was a redistribution of empathy. And we take empathy away from the people who don't deserve it, and we give more empathy to people who we think deserve it. Right? See, as opposed to just having more empathy for people.
That's what I was about to say. Wouldn't it make more sense to have more empathy for everybody, regardless of who you are, the things you think? Because like the way that I think you can create a better society, okay, racism, for example, the way you get rid of that and you uproot things like that isn't by shouting and destroying.
Yeah.
It's by talking to, seeking to understand, even if it's the most frustrating thing. I'm not saying I could do it. I'm not going to put myself on some pedestal. I would probably get pissed and not be able to do it.
But I think that's like true anti-racism. Like actually,
it's like, let me try to understand, even if it's really dumb reasoning, why does this person believe this thing? Okay. And then just talk to them. Go, okay, so what about this? Okay, you ask questions. You engage in a dialogue. Yeah. And over time, you can change what's in that person's mind and therefore what is in their heart. Yeah. By seeking to understand people and why people think certain things, that's how you change people. You don't change people really, by screaming and yelling.
And helping them understand you, too. Like, I think a lot of times we tend to shift the responsibility away from ourselves and say that, like, it's not my job to educate you about myself. Actually, it is. I think it is, actually. Because how am I going to understand you if you don't help me understand?
Right.
You know, I can't just know how you feel or why you feel that way or what you think or why you think that way. And so I think in some ways, if we want to be understood, and I think there's a very strong argument that we should want to be understood by each other.
Absolutely.
For the betterment of ourselves, for others, and society in general, then yes, you should actually try and help people understand you, and you should also try and understand others. It's just a holistic thing. It's like, I try to understand you, you try to understand me, I try to help you understand me, you try to help me understand you. And I think with that approach, we can actually make real progress in society.
I agree. I think the best way the best way to learn about people is through conversation. The best way to learn about different things is through conversation. You're not going to learn about what makes a white supremacist by reading about it online. And I am not saying to go talk to one, and because you don't know how they're going to react. They might be violent. I'm not saying that.
You don't want to go talk to someone who wants to kill you.
That
would not be good. Yeah.
That would not be good. Yeah. I should clarify that. But what I am saying is you will never understand why someone believes what they believe if you don't talk to them. And Daryl Davis was a black man in the South in I think it was the 70s and stuff. It's just a while back by now.
When the South was actually really dangerous, yeah.
And he would talk to white supremacists, KKK members.
Intentionally. Yeah.
He would go out of his way to, he would go out of his way to talk to them. And it's like, okay, like I said, I'm not saying I could do it. I'm not saying that anybody can do it. I'm also saying that the people who can do it should do it. And the people that can't do it, myself included, is learning how to truly have that patience and understanding. The whole patience is a virtue. You're not going to change someone overnight. You have to learn how to have patience and go, what you're saying is dumb as shit, but I'm going to listen. And learning how to keep that to yourself. Learning how to go, okay, what you're saying is probably dumb. Let me at least try to understand it.
Empathy is really important there. I think empathy is kind of like the underlying theme here, because if you don't have empathy, you're not going to be able to do this. I think that this is a huge mistake that we make, where we see people and we classify them as bad, or we say you're a white supremacist, therefore I don't have to talk to you. I don't have to think about you as a person. I don't have to have empathy for you because, it doesn't have to be white supremacist. You take any egregious thing, or sometimes not even very egregious things that people do, and we see them as this wrong kind of person, not deserving of our empathy. I think that in itself is a mistake, and that actually makes us more calloused, and that reflects that makes us worse when we look at someone who, it could be something really bad like a serial killer. It could be something not that bad like I don't know, maybe just the way certain people talk and use words that we don't like. And but I think it's just a mistake to look at those people in either case and say, oh, you are not deserving of my empathy, And this is a lot of times, I think, not something that we consciously say. We're not consciously going, oh, this person, they're a bad person. They don't deserve to be looked at as a person. No, this is just something that we will do almost without noticing, almost subconsciously. We will just not look at that person and not empathize with that person because, in many cases, whatever they are is foreign completely from what we are, and we can't understand, why would you kill someone? Why would you want to do such a terrible thing? And we can't understand why don't you care about the words that come out of your mouth? And why would you say such terrible things, you know? Because maybe our understanding of the world is different from theirs, but even there, like, I feel like a lot of times we don't even get to that point, and to think that, like, wait, this is another person. They have a different mentality. They grew up different. They have a completely different mental state from me. That's why I can't understand them, right? That's we're on different wavelengths. So to get to that point and to recognize that, and then try and understand how they actually feel, how they see the world, I think this is probably some of the most difficult things for people to do, especially when looking at more egregious cases. Like if we look at cases of, particularly egregious and heinous crimes, and we look at that individual, like, how can we empathize with that person? That seems dangerous. Like, I don't want to get in the mind of a terrible person. I don't want to know what that person feels like, because that's terrifying. And it's like, it is terrifying. And, if you can't do it, like, maybe you shouldn't do it, because maybe that's not for everyone. Maybe it's not everyone's job to understand and empathize with that person.
Right.
But if that's not your role, recognize that maybe that's not your role. But if you can, because maybe you've been there, maybe you've had mental illness, maybe you've had dark thoughts, maybe you've done terrible things yourself, and you've now come to a different point in your life where you can look at other people who are like that, or who have done bad things, and you can understand maybe why they're like that, how they became that way, and you can empathize with them. I think, like, yes, like, you should listen to that part of yourself, and you should, use this empathy to do good in the world, and kind of not do this is unfortunately socially acceptable thing of saying, like, no, you aren't deserving of being treated as a human. You don't deserve any empathy because, like, you've crossed the line. And sometimes that line is, like, not very far. Like, sometimes it's like you said the wrong word, we go away. Like, you're not a human anymore, Right. Sometimes it's something like that.
I agree, man. I had a point to make. Because you were making really good points, and I do really agree with you. And I think that, like you said, understanding different people. So I think that, I don't remember. It's okay. I had a point to make, but
no,
I'm not even. It's okay.
You were talking about empathy and stuff, and
I know.
Did you forget?
That's right.
You lost it.
I lost it. It's okay. I'm gonna forgive myself because we haven't done this in months.
That's true. We haven't.
See, it's easier. It's easy when we're just having a conversation, that if we have these brain farts, it's like, oh, whatever. But when you're in a podcast, it's like, you kind of need to keep this shit going.
It's like, okay. I feel like sometimes it's just kind of like, especially when you're on a roll and then you get a thought and you're like, ooh, yeah. And then you lose it. You're like, no.
Yeah, exactly. That is exactly what just happened to me right now.
Yeah.
Yeah, dude.
Man.
But I don't know. I think that this world needs radical empathy. I think that we need to really understand different people. Oh, and I remembered what I was going to say. I think when we talk about empathy, that I'm not saying excuse and try to come up with an excuse as to why someone did something. I'm saying understand why someone did something, and then thinking about something. I'm not saying excuse someone for being racist. That is not what I am saying at all. What I'm saying is try to understand why they are.
Yeah.
And then change, and not necessarily actively trying to change them, but through having conversations with them and empathizing with their story, with their life, I think then you can start to change who they are without even actively trying to change who they are.
If anything, just show them who you are and show. See, actually,
exactly.
This is where I feel like people, especially when they get together in groups, they're just shooting themselves in the foot a lot. It's because, especially on the left, and you see the left a lot because this is what you see on social media and the news, etc. You have people who act in a very militant manner. There's that kind of meme idea of like you're a militant leftist or whatever, right? And
Sure.
you know, but there are people who are militant about their ideologies, and they're very willing to impose their ideas on other people at all costs, and to see the
It happens
world
on both
made
sides.
a certain,
Absolutely.
sure, definitely. But I think like when you take a certain approach and you know, act in a very unruly manner, and you basically you show your enemy that actually we're worth you attacking us, you know? If you show them that actually you're pretty bad, you know, and you make them feel justified in attacking you, you know? But if you show your enemy love, and I think it's kind of extreme too to think of people sometimes as like your enemy, but say you take a militant position on something, you see someone as your enemy, or you see a certain group or ideology as your enemy, then I think if you come at your enemy with love, they'll just be like eternally confused, you know? And suddenly them attacking you is no longer justified. It's no longer justifiable. It becomes a lot harder to justify attacking an enemy when that enemy is not attacking you, or if that enemy wants to do right by you, or make amends with you, or do good. Then all of a sudden it becomes almost impossible to rationally justify any argument to attack and destroy these people. And so that goes for both sides.
Absolutely.
Right? Yeah.
Sorry, go ahead.
No, that was what I wanted to say.
There's this great story about one of the Sikh gurus. He was in a Gurdwara, and the Mongol Empire, or Emperor, came. And the Guru said, he basically just told him, you're my equal. You're not greater or lesser than me. You're not greater than me. I'm not lesser than you. He just talked to him, and the king or emperor or whatever took out his sword. And instead of getting angry, the Guru said, have I wronged you? Have I treated you with disrespect? Have I treated you unempathetically? Have I done anything that promotes some sort of injustice? Why are you doing this? What is the point? Right? He says, I've done nothing but treat you as my equal. Put the sword down. And I think the reason that ties in is because I think people are quick to respond to things that they don't understand and that they don't like. They're quick to respond to things that make them uncomfortable and make them angry, when really the thing to do is stop for a moment and reflect and go, what actually just happened? Why am I responding this way? And how should I respond to something? To go off of what you were saying, I think that when you approach someone with kindness that doesn't deserve it, you know what? Here, I know I've told this story before, but it was another guy who's gotten people out of white supremacy organizations because he was a white supremacist. So he knows how to empathize with these people and try to understand these people. And I love the thing that he says at the end of his speech. He says, show empathy to the people that you think deserve it the least. Because that is how you create a better world. Yes. That is one of the most impactful things I've ever heard. And here's the thing.
100%.
What works? Okay? Having this idea, like I said, of radical empathy. This idea of having radical empathy for people and really trying to understand them. And in doing that, you can change who they are as people, or screaming and yelling and getting angry. Now, I'm not saying that getting angry at someone for being racist is not justified. I think it is justified to be angry at someone for doing that. Absolutely. You know, if someone calls you a racial slur, no shit, you're going to get mad. I think that that's justified. But I think generally speaking, though... Sorry, go ahead. You make your point.
Well, there could be things that are justified that aren't necessarily helpful. It could be justified to get mad, but is it better to get mad?
Exactly.
Does that make anything better?
Going to get at.
Yeah.
It is, what's the best way to respond to something? And it's not always the easy path. I think oftentimes it's the harder path. It's the harder road. And again, there's that quote of the harder road is the less traveled one, or however it goes. Mm-hmm. It's harder to have true empathy for people. It's harder to seek a true understanding of someone you might hate. It's hard to do that. But I think that's what we should do if we want to actually create a better society. You don't create a better society through anger and hate. Because, like, hate creates more hate.
Yes. Yes.
The only 100%. Way you get
100%.
rid of hate is through love. Now, that doesn't always work. You can only show so much kindness to someone. You can only show so much love to someone. Some people just won't change.
You could love to death.
But I think that a lot of people will.
Yeah.
And a lot of people can. And I think that people deserve a chance and they deserve empathy.
I think we've gone through different periods throughout our evolutionary history and throughout our time here in recent history and on Earth as humans. And I think that we're at a point now in society where it isn't necessary anymore, right now at least, say in the United States, where, in our contemporary society, we have to say that we shouldn't empathize with people, or that we ought to not empathize with people because they're a killer. Or simply they don't have the same idea that we do. Or they just have a different idea, or they say something that we think is wrong. And that can be something simple like red is the best color.
Right.
Yeah, because sometimes it's really something that simple. And then, you know what? Blue's the best color. I hate you. I can never agree with you. Red will never be the best. You're just wrong. Right? And I just think there's no place for this in our society, because we don't need to do that. If you look at our evolutionary history, there was a time where I would say, and it made sense, and it makes sense why we do this now actually, but because, say you had someone in your group of 50 tribal people, right? If one person kills someone, that's a huge fucking problem. You're going to get rid of that person, Maybe not even depending on what the circumstances are, because there's 50 of you, and one of you just killed another one. So now there's 48. Right. Yeah. But when you have 300 million people in a society,
right,
and theoretically there's a place for everyone, there's theoretically is kind of a job that everyone can do, or a role that everyone can play, at least, then, I think it's time to stop acting like we have to remove people completely, and I think you can wonder sometimes, like, well, at the point we're at now, is it ever appropriate to say, like, that someone should be removed not only from dialogue, but from the society as a whole, that they should be completely ostracized?
Right.
I think it's a hard question to answer, because, at least for myself, I would say, like, even for the most egregious things, I still think that maybe there's if not a path for redemption, there's probably still a place for that person in our society now. Yeah. Because it's not necessarily the case. Like, we could put this person in jail and they'll never see the light of day again. Right? So, do we have to also kill them?
Right.
I don't know.
Right.
Like, and even putting people in jail, like, what is the threshold for that? Like, because America, or the United States, I should say, puts a lot of people in jail, as you know.
Yep. I think we have the highest prison population in the world.
Yep.
Or it's up there.
I know what you're talking about, though. Yeah, it's something like that. Yeah.
It's like our population is X% of the world, and our prison population is X% of the whole prison population, and it's some ridiculous number. And that gets into a bunch of political stuff, which I think I think this has been a good focused conversation. I don't want to go all over the place, but
yeah, but
yeah, man. All right, let me see what time it is.
I think it's like 6. Oh,
6?
9.
Yeah. It's
6
6.
a.m.
It's 6 right now. Yeah, it's 6.
It's 6 a.m. No, it's like 9:50. But
it's about 9:50.
yeah, I mean, these are all interesting things to think about, though. Kind of like, where's that threshold, and is it really necessary for us to throw people out of society, or what is a better way for us to deal with people now? Because it's not necessarily the case that just because someone has a different idea than us, everything's going to fall apart. Whereas maybe that would have been the case at one point. That's not the case anymore, you know?
I don't think so. I think we're too large of a society
we need
for
to adapt.
that to be exactly. And that humans have shown that we can adapt to different things.
Sure.
The way society functions. I just think that we just need to continue doing so.
Yeah, I think, if you look at the United States right now, I know I keep using the United States as an example. It's just so easy.
It's relevant. We live here. And probably most of the people listening, I think, live here. So. Yeah,
definitely. But so I think that if we kind of look at ourselves right now, it's almost like a body having a cytokine storm where it has this overreaction to something that's not actually gonna kill you, and that overreaction could actually itself kill you, and so it's almost like the symptoms. We're at a point now where the symptoms are starting to become worse than the problems themselves. The symptoms of the issues and the reactions to the issues are starting to become worse than the issues themselves. And so I think that this is an issue that has kind of primarily come about due to our ignorance, our kind of just lack of knowledge about things, our lack of understanding of history, and also our distracted nature and kind of our inability to really take an honest look at our society and try and find and seek out the real issues, and to really understand okay, what is actually going on here? Why are we seeing XYZ happening? Is this justified? Look at the reason that XYZ is happening and say, why is that happening? So police brutality. We see mass protests and reactions to police brutality. Then we see mass protests across the world in reaction to police brutality. We see mass protests, and we see people protesting in countries saying, hands up, don't shoot, in countries where the police officers don't even have guns. So I'm a little confused about this, because it's is that really a problem in your society? Is that really what you ought to be addressing and thinking about? Or are you just focusing on that and ignoring the real issues? So it's like something catches on fire in your house, but there's a wildfire surrounding your house outside. But you're focusing on putting out this, I don't know, it could be something like there's a matchstick burning in your house, or you left your incense on or something, and it's not going to burn down the whole house. But your house is about to be consumed by a fire, a raging fire outside or something, And it's what should you be worried about here? I feel like that maybe is not a great analogy, but
yeah, I think that with the specific thing you were talking about, I get what you're saying, but I think a lot of the response that went around the world happened for a few reasons. Definitely social media and being in an echo chamber.
Oh, yeah.
But I think a lot of it, not all of it, maybe not even most of it, and tying back into our conversation, was that I think people felt bad for people in this country. And while I agree with you, and I think that, different countries have different problems, I think it was a way of showing we understand you and we empathize with you. And I'm trying to view this with hopefully having some faith in humanity, right?
Like kind of the best light possible, like.
Yeah, like I'm going to try to give people the benefit of the doubt, even if it may not be the case. But I think you're right. And I think that, focus on what's a problem in your society. I also think that social media played a huge role in, I guess, making things seem like a problem in X country when it's a problem in Y country or whatever. Mm-hmm. But I think a lot of it definitely had to do with people were like, hey, we're with you, we stand with you, we understand you, and I think it was a way of showing empathy and a way of showing an understanding and like solidarity almost.
Okay, yeah. I think that's
now that's coming from it from a view of trying to view everything positively. There's definitely all right, let's get super analytical about everything, which I think we should do.
There's other ways to look at this, of course, yeah.
There's other ways to look at it. But generally speaking, I think that, well, not generally speaking, but in relation to what we were talking about, I do think that a lot of it was from a place of empathy and seeking to understand.
I think the other thing too that happens with social media is that you'll see things, you'll see whether it's a video or someone posts something saying about something that happened or it's a tweet or whatever, and then the fact that anyone in the world can see this, it can feel real. It can feel like it's actually happening there, even though it's not. It could be happening across the ocean. No, for sure. You see a video of it and you're like, no, this is really happening. This is real. Mm-hmm. And it's real there, right? Mm-hmm. But I feel like the human mind is not equipped to deal with this kind of, huge, this kind of ability that we've been given to not only be manipulated by social media, like psychologically, like that stuff they talk about in documentaries like The Social Experiment, but also we've been given this ability to really see things that are happening all over the world if we want. And
which we used to not be able to do.
Yeah, we've never been able to do that before, I mean, you might have heard something like, did you hear what happened in France? They started a revolution. It's kind of crazy. Right. I heard they were cutting people's heads off. Now you can like see that in real time.
What's happening. Yeah.
Exactly. And so it's completely different kind of thing that I feel like we're not at all like, able to deal with, like on a psychological level. I feel like we're kind of, we're like totally tripping because it has only ever been the case that we need to know what's going on around us in kind of our immediate vicinity at any given time. We need to know, are we safe? Do we have food? Can I lay down here? What was that over there? Is that an enemy or, and I feel like our spatial awareness has kind of grown and now it's almost kind of like global because of social media. And so like, I just don't know. I know there are people who are looking at these issues of kind of how social media has changed the world and how it's shaping our minds and affecting us in ways that we never knew it would. And they're looking at these issues and trying to find ways to solve these problems and to really think of solutions. But this is something that's very difficult to do. And we're seeing the changes in people's actions and in our behaviors, very rapidly. 10 years and the human mind and our actions and our behaviors is starting to change in a way that it like never has before. Like there's just so much information and there's so much manipulation that I think we can't possibly handle it. And so I just wonder, like, how can we get past this and how will this not just inevitably all implode, Right.
Yeah, I mean, I wouldn't know. I mean, it's... I think that in particular is something that we have to adapt to, social media. And I think the first step is becoming conscious of the fact that we are manipulated on social media. It's very easy to be manipulated on social media and very easy to be in an echo chamber. And I think recognizing that can happen is the first step. I don't think that there's some grand thing on like a huge societal level that can be done. I think it is up to individuals to recognize the manipulation and to recognize that, ooh, I'm in an echo chamber, or maybe I'm not in one, or whatever it is. It comes down to the individual and responsibility on the individual in order to change. Again, this is a great thing that Nabil said one time. In order to create a better society, you have to create a better individual. And then he goes on, but I think that specific part ties in here. The individual has to become responsible and has to become aware and conscious of these certain things. And if many individuals do that, what happens? Then society starts to change.
Right.
But it starts with individual responsibility and the individual effort
of those individuals, right?
Exactly.
Yeah. So this is another one of those tricky kind of like mind fucks, because it's like society is made up of people.
Right.
People make up society, and then society influences people.
Right.
So it's like a loop.
So then think about that though. What has the ultimate power is people. It's the people and the individuals that make up the society. And if people recognize that, and if people decide to change themselves, again, I love how this is coming full circle now. If people decide to change themselves and decide to help others change themselves, don't go out trying to change other people. I think go with the intention of helping others try to change themselves. I think there's a difference. But becoming a better individual and helping other individuals become better individuals, I think that's how you create a better society. And I think that's how you, regardless of what it is, whether it's the social media manipulation like we were just talking about, if it's racism and empathy like we were talking about earlier, whatever it is, the way you do that is by recognizing the individual and the importance of the individual in the larger society, and recognizing that it is we who create this thing.
Yeah.
And the only way that you actually change society is by changing the individual.
Yeah, and by changing yourself, because then that has an
Absolutely.
impact that to the people around you. You know, when
Absolutely.
you make a personal change, then the people around you are affected by that. You know.
Yeah.
And you can start fires in society in terms of like, one person does something, gets another person to do it. People start changing. Individuals start to change. And all it takes sometimes is really one individual. Right. I mean, everything starts with one person. And exponentially grows. Until eventually you get a change on the level of an entire society. Now.
Absolutely.
Right.
Yeah.
Yeah. This was really good. I really love doing this podcast thing. This is super cool.
Me too, man. I'm so excited to be doing this again.
I'm
really excited, bro. This was a good conversation. Man. I'm happy with this. This was cool.
Yes.
This is a good comeback.
Yeah, dude. It really is. So
I'm excited,
cool.
man.
I mean, I think this is like a good spot.
Yeah.
That was very we went full circle and
yeah. Yeah, man. All right. Well, I'm going to go ahead and end the recording.
Cool.
Real quick. Let me go ahead and do that.
And stop.